Right then, grab something sturdy to hold on to, because what Meghan Markle has just done in this latest magazine interview is so spectacularly, so breathtakingly tone deaf that I genuinely had to put the kettle on twice before I could compose myself enough to speak about it sensibly. She has sat down with a glossy publication, arranged herself just so, had her hair done to absolute perfection, and then pointed the finger of blame squarely at the royal family for her own unravelling. And darling, the sheer audacity of it has left this country utterly flawed. Let me tell you what is actually happening here, because the picture being painted inside that magazine and the picture being painted by the real world outside it are two rather different canvases. On one hand, you have a beautifully lit photograph of a woman who presents herself as a victim of circumstance, a warm and authentic soul who was simply too much for an old institution to contain. On the other hand, you have serious industry publications running in-depth pieces this week on precisely how and why the Sussex brand has collapsed. And the collapse, darling, is comprehensive. We have already spoken about Netflix, about WME, about the Variety investigation, so I am not going to rehash all of that today because we have covered that ground thoroughly. But I do want to tie those threads together with what is now emerging, because the timing of this particular magazine cover tells you something rather important. When a brand is in genuine freefall and the executive floors of Hollywood have gone distinctly cold, there are really only two options available to you. You can stop, reflect honestly, and take proper stock of your situation with the kind of genuine self-awareness that leads to actual growth, or you can pick up the telephone to a sympathetic publication, book a very good photographer, and produce a fresh version of the story in which someone else is entirely to blame for everything. One of those options is considerably harder than the other. I rather think you can guess which one has been chosen. Now, I want to be absolutely fair, because fairness matters more to me than a cheap headline any day of the week. The royal family is not perfect. No institution run by human beings ever is, and I would never claim otherwise. But here is what I know with absolute certainty. The royal family did not cancel the Netflix deal. The royal family did not reportedly push Ari Emanuel of WME to his professional breaking point. The royal family was not in the room when the mood at the world's most powerful streaming company became, according to multiple credible sources, thoroughly and completely done. These are outcomes produced entirely by choices that Meghan and Harry made far from any palace corridor, in the full freedom of their California life, entirely on their own terms. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that makes me want to sit this woman down with a good strong Yorkshire Gold and have a proper honest conversation, is that she appears entirely unable to see it. Brand and public relations experts quoted this very week have said what an enormous number of sensible people have been saying for years. Their repeated public criticisms of the royal family have eroded the very association that gave them their commercial value in the first place. The prestige they traded on, the prestige they sold to every streaming service and every glossy magazine that would have them, was borrowed prestige. It came from those titles. It came from that history. It came from the extraordinary institution they spent the better part of 6 years publicly dismantling. And now the well is dry. The executives are weary of the same story told in its 6th consecutive variation, and rather than reckon honestly with any of that reality, reality, the response is apparently another magazine cover with another beautifully presented round of grievance aimed squarely at Windsor. One expert quoted this week put it rather well. Their repeated criticisms of the royal family have undercut the very association that once gave them value. They need to lean away from it. Now that is a piece of professional advice so plain, so obviously sensible, that I genuinely cannot understand why it has not been taken. Unless, of course, the criticisms are not a strategy at all, but something rather deeper. A genuine inability to accept that the story of who is to blame for all of this might need rather significant revising. And there is another thing worth noting, because it forms a rather important part of the picture. The Sussex brand identity problem, as multiple PR professionals have now described it quite openly, is that this couple never answered the most basic question available to them. Were they royals? Were they private citizens? Were they activists? Were they media entrepreneurs? Were they a lifestyle brand? Were they a production company? The answer apparently was all of the above and none of the above simultaneously, depending on which was most convenient at any given moment. And in that fog of perpetual reinvention, the audience, which is really not as easily managed as it might once have been assumed to be, simply started to drift away. A brand that asks its audience to work out for itself what it stands for is, as one expert put it with admirable precision, asking them to do a job they have not volunteered for. And they will not do it. They will simply look elsewhere, which is precisely what they have done. This brings me to something that landed just this week, and it stopped me rather cold. Hugo Vickers, that meticulous and deeply serious royal biographer who knew our late Queen personally and whose new book is causing considerable ripples, has revealed that the damage between the Sussexes and the palace became so profound that whenever Harry rang, the Queen would quietly ask her lady-in-waiting to be present in the room with her. Monosyllabic conversations, reportedly. The woman who gave 70 years of her life to this country, who steered the institution through wars and abdications and every conceivable constitutional difficulty with absolute unshakable grace, had reached a point of such private wariness that she needed a companion beside her simply to take a telephone call from her own beloved grandson. That is not a trivial detail. That is a devastating one. And the fact that Meghan is reportedly furious, steaming in the words of one royal commentator, about this revelation tells you rather a lot. One is not enraged by revelations that bear no resemblance whatsoever to one's actual conduct. And then there is the matter of the royal return, because this is where the whole business becomes genuinely fascinating, in the way that a very complicated knot becomes fascinating. You simply cannot look away. Royal circles are openly discussing the fact that the couple's attempt to rebuild bridges with King Charles has foundered rather badly. The plan, apparently, was to reconnect with the monarch and trade once again on that regal association to shore up the flagging commercial empire, to link California lifestyle with Windsor prestige. A source close to the king issued a pointed public statement suggesting that if Harry truly wished to repair his relationship with his father, private matters ought to be kept private. I cannot imagine a more courteous and yet more completely devastating response. Our royal family always did do dignified understatement rather brilliantly. What I find so instructive about all of this, and I have been turning it over like a stone in my pocket since the week began, is the extraordinary thing that was actually on offer 6 years ago. The late Queen extended herself to this woman. Our king walked her down the aisle when her own father could not be there. This country, with its somewhat weather-beaten tolerance and its fundamental decency, gave her a genuine welcome and a genuine purpose. She was given patronages. She was given history. She was given the quiet dignity of real public service within a centuries-old tradition that no streaming deal and no lifestyle brand can manufacture from scratch. And she found it too small. One cannot help but but observe that if the royal family truly had been as impossible as the magazine cover apparently suggests, then Hollywood would have been the rescue she promised herself, and the world it would be. But Hollywood has reached very much the same conclusion that the palace eventually did, which is that this particular arrangement is considerably more trouble than it is worth. When the same professional verdict is delivered by people on both sides of the Atlantic who have absolutely nothing to do with each other, the common denominator in every single one of these endings deserves far more examination than another beautifully staged photo shoot is ever going to provide. So here we are in April of 2026. Netflix, gone. Spotify, long gone. WME, done with the meaningful personal representation. Archwell Philanthropies, having laid off staff. The summer royal reunion, looking extremely remote. The magazine cover, pointing at the palace. Every single time something does not work, the explanation points firmly outward. The institution was stifling. The press was cruel. The industry was not ready. The family never truly embraced her. And through every chapter of this rather exhausting saga, the one explanation that is never offered is the simplest and most available one. That perhaps the choices made were simply the wrong ones, and that the people who quietly tried to say so at the time deserved rather more credit than they received. There is also something worth saying about the children, because it has been raised this week and I think it matters deeply. A royal commentator appearing on Sky News Australia described Meghan's recent use of the children in her As Ever brand communications as, and I am going to quote this because it deserves to be heard clearly, craven and sick. Those are not words deployed lightly by a serious person. The suggestion being made is that as the commercial empire falters, the children are being deployed as brand assets to generate warmth and engagement at a moment when warmth and engagement are in rather short supply. I find that thought genuinely troubling. Not because I doubt the love of a mother for her children, but because the line between sharing and deploying is one that deserves to be treated with rather more care than appears to have been given to it. The crown endures. It simply does. King Charles is preparing for a significant state visit to America, a moment of genuine diplomatic importance for this country. The Prince and Princess of Wales continue their work with the kind of characteristic commitment and grace that makes this nation genuinely proud. The institution that was apparently so dreadful and so constraining and so utterly impossible to inhabit is carrying on precisely as it always has through far more turbulent chapters than this one. It does not require her approval to do so. It never did. It simply requires what it has always required, which is people willing to put something greater than themselves first. That requirement, more than any palace protocol or courtly tradition, is the thing that was ultimately found too demanding. Mark my words. When the noise of all this eventually settles, as it always does, when the magazine covers are lining the recycling bin and the lifestyle brand has had its next inevitable reinvention, what will remain standing is precisely what was there before any of this began: the institution, the crown, the thoroughly and gloriously British tradition of getting quietly on with it. No photo shoot required, no finger pointing necessary, just the quiet, enduring, magnificent business of serving something greater than yourself. Britain has always understood that. It always will.